So here's the idea. I call it ontograph. Okay. So it comes from the Greek word ontos, which means to be or exist, and graph, which means to draw or write or record. Okay. And I called it that because I was thinking, in your mind, you've got sort of a map of existence. And it's more than just a map of the world. You've got a map, you've got a cartograph in your head that you use to drive around. If somebody asks you where Japan is, you think about the shape of the globe and your brain goes like this. People think different ways. I'm kind of visual. But in your mind, you have a map of existence, not just objects that exist in the objective world, but also your feelings about them.
You sound like confirmational bias and just like your perception of based on all your experiences, like this is just how you see things.
Totally, right? So if you have confirmation bias is a kind of normality bias where you expect the things that you encounter to be like the things you've encountered, because your map of existence that you have in your head sucks. It has less than a trillionth of the information that you might have encountered if you were perfectly aware from the time you were born or from the time you were gestating.
It's the things you selectively remember or selectively say is of greatest importance to make future decisions.
That's true. And you've got a sort of like level of attention. If anything that is in your ontograph, in this mental map of existence that you have in your head, could be rated on different scales. So you could say like things that I like. And of the things you've encountered in your life, many of them you have no opinion and you haven't considered. Be like, well, I didn't even know what that particular sort of weed was until I encountered it. Now I know that it's purslane and I like it. You know what I mean? But until you can categorize something, you might not know how you feel about it. But some people are less structured in their mind and they have like more vague explanations of their experiences. So we all have our own personality and that kind of dictates how we perceive the things we've experienced. Some people are great at making categories. Some people are terrible at making categories. So I'm not great at making categories. I'm very high in openness, which is why I like to have conversations in my backyard in my pajamas with my homies that I just met, you know, on a recording about philosophy of everything. Yeah, right? So like I could be like, my mother's an accountant and she gets a lot out of making checklists and checking things out. And she gets a lot out of making sure that somebody's books are watertight. You know what I mean? And like she even has her like favorite subsection of accounting. And if she can get somebody else to do the other stuff, it's a perfect team.
And if you're off by 5 cents, you might as well be off by $1 million.
Yeah, what are you even doing?
I've encountered.
Sure, and it's awesome. I need people like that because I can't do that. My daughter Becca, very orderly person. Her favorite thing in the world is a puzzle because when you're done, it's perfect. Everything is exactly where it belongs, no doubt. Yeah. Anyway, I'm not like that, but she's going to see the world with tighter categories than I am.
Yes.
And I'm going to see the world with like categories that are interpermeable, categories where there's like a lot of fringe, a lot of fuzz around the edge. But anyway, so your own personality is going to come through in your ontograph. And when you explain an experience you had, some people aren't going to relate to it very well because their ontograph is really different.
Yeah.
So, like my brother, David, and I grew up until I was about 15. We lived in the same house and we experienced so many different things together. And so like I was explaining the ontograph to this guy, Dan, that I was telling you about before. And he was like, oh yeah, Dave just told me how you and he used to look at the Thomas Brothers guide, a spiral bound map book of Sacramento. And we would like look and be like, oh, that's Folsom Dam. How would we get up there if we wanted to? And all that sort of thing. We had that experience together, just the two of us, nobody else. And they couldn't tell you what it was like. But even if they could tell you what happened, because they'd read a perfect record that had every detail jotted down, which would be impossible. They couldn't tell you what it was like because they weren't there and they didn't experience it. And that's the funny thing about the ontograph. The objective world isn't like something. It just is. But in your ontograph, you experience experiences and you feel things and you can have something about what it's like.
And you're dealing with like trillions of variables.
Yeah.
With background and with just the way your brain is even made up.
Right.
It's just crazy. We have a daughter that's, she has a couple diagnoses that, where her, part of her brain formation is just, it was a little diagnosis that said, some people would abort, and we didn't, and stuff like that, because they didn't know where on the spectrum it would be.
Sure.
And it's like, I've watched it, and there are personality things that she has, but I always think, I wonder if the other children's brains are just a little bit, but not enough to meet, like, this is a diagnosis. It's just a little bit different.
Right.
So it's like, you got that, and you got those individualized experiences of living somewhere, and the smells, and the weather, and the food, and it creates just an unimaginable, complex amount of different variables intersecting where no life is the same.
Yeah, totally. Right. And when you have like a couple of variables, then they have their variance. Say one of your variables could possibly be from somewhere between 0 and 10. And then you've got another variable where it could possibly be between 0 and 80. And then, combined, it could be anywhere. When you multiply them together, it could be anywhere from 0 to 800. But the more variables you get, the crazier the range is, and you get combinatorial explosion. And since there are unlimited variables, you're constantly wading through combinatorial explosion, and you have to choose what to focus on. What, Charles?
Is it on full bag of Ritz crackers?
You can have the bag of Ritz crackers. You need to share, okay? Okay, enjoy them, Charles.
Have you seen those videos where, like, this guy, there's some of those, but there's this guy, and he was like, back when everyone was zooming because of COVID, he was at his house, and like his office door opens, and one of the kids like wanders in. I think he's got like one of those little things there they can walk, a little table they walk in, and then the other one comes running in, and he's like, you can see it in the thing, and then the wife comes in and she like ducks and she's trying to track the children. And he's like, I think my children just came in, doing everything.
I was talking to some rich dude today on the phone about some enormously expensive marketing program that would be completely awesome and I hope to afford, right? And he was just talking to me, and I'm like, hold on, my 5-year-old has a question. I dug down, talked to my daughter, for a second. People like it, actually, most of the time. Anyway, so you've got to make some kind of sense of the infinite variables, and you have to choose what to focus on.
It's like survival.
And whatever you focus on, you get a higher resolution version of that in your ontograph. Now, it's an infinitely high resolution version of the thing in the objective world.
I was going to say, and it could be a high resolution of something that's like totally crazy, or we may say wrong, but that doesn't matter because it's super high resolution for you.
Totally. Yes. Well, everything you imagine is still in your ontograph. It doesn't exist in the objective world necessarily, except the funny thing is, our perception of the objective world is all we can talk about. And that's what we imagined that we experienced in the objective world. So it's a little bit silly, but yeah, I like if your awesome orange shoes, like we could look at them from every direction. We could use a mass spectrometer, find out how heavy they are and where the weight balance is inside of them. We could use I don't remember what it's called, something that detects all of the different wavelength emanations from it, and from every direction, and make a, pretend we can make a perfectly high resolution version of it. You wouldn't have time in your lifetime to like experience the shoe, let alone anything else. But what you put your shoe on, and you come over, you walk across the grass, you know what that feels like. And nothing in the objective world could tell you what it feels like to walk in those shoes. So there's this split between the objective world that exists, that you live in, but what you're actually navigating is the version of this objective world you've imagined in your head, which is your ontograph, which is different from everyone else's ontograph. And I wanted to hear if you've heard of any ideas like this before.
I mean, as you've been talking, I have thoughts.
I want to hear them.
I don't know that I like, did you come up with the terminology ontograph?
I made up the word ontograph because I didn't have a great way to describe it. And even just reading my earliest writings about this, which was only a few months ago, my understanding of this, or my impression of this concept, has improved dramatically. Like, I was trying to get at something, and I feel like I'm getting at it with increasing accuracy, developing a higher resolution of the ontograph inside my ontograph.
Well, it's really fascinating because when you said that, I thought, I don't know if that's a term you just made up of obviously a couple of roots, but, or if that's something that you borrowed from somewhere else, but it reminded me of when I was studying philosophy. And one of the first things with philosophy is you have to learn the new language, because
Yeah.
typically what they're doing is they're trying to convey something new, or a new perception, or a new way of understanding.
Yeah.
And the current vocabulary doesn't quite meet it. Otherwise,
Right.
maybe it would already be understood, or it would already be out there.
Yeah.
And so there is like this new language of, ontograph and just the things they make up, and you almost
Yeah.
have to like learn how they're defining that to
Right.
then understand what they're getting at. So that was my first thought is,
Right.
this is, like, just takes me back to that time.
Yeah. One of my, I guess my first experience with hard philosophy was finding Being and Time by Martin Heidegger in the
Heidegger.
college library, and it was fantastic. But it was a lot of words, new words,
Yes.
like Befindlichkeit.
Yeah.
Like, oh, okay.
He'd use the German words. Huh?
He would use the German words because he's like, look, there's going to be a new word for this. German sticks words together pretty great, and you can guarantee that it's not already in use.
Yeah.
So since we'd have to make it in German or in Greek or whatever anyway, I'm just going to do what feels natural to me, and then that won't impede me as we go along.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah.
I remember my first philosophy teacher was a Heidegger fan, and I don't know that I read Heidegger, but I remember him talking about him often. So.
Yeah. So one of the things that I read in Heidegger that helped me sort of put this together is he tried to make as few assumptions as possible and just explain what it's like to exist in a place. And that's why it's being and time. Well, when he says being, the German word he uses for that is Dasein, which means being there. Da means there or here. Is it? It's one or the other. It's a place. And then Sein means to exist.
Yeah.
So like when you're being in a place, like you have a will, and you can use the things in the place as tools, or they can be obstacles. And there are, if something isn't a tool but could become a tool, then it's a tool that's near to hand instead of a tool that's in hand, and different things like that. So like
fortune teller out of a piece of cheese.
fantastic, good job.
Make a fortune.
Yeah, she makes we called them cootie catchers when I was in school. It's a little four-way folded thing. You can open it up, and she uses them to tell fortunes. You write, a letter, a number, or something, and then you open it up. Yeah. So she made one out of a slice of cheese. Little Colby Jack fortune teller happening in there. Exactly.
You don't like the fortune you got.
It's like fortune cookies.
Yeah.
Piker. Anyway, fortune cheese for the win. So anyway, yeah. So that kind of thought about like what does it mean to exist, or what are the basic fundamentals of existence? And then I'm thinking more about like, so if you do that existing for a while, what unfolds? And what unfolds is, since the time you're a baby, you have these experiences where you're being fed by your mother, and you feel warm and soft and close, and you're falling on a tile floor, and you're like, why are parts of the earth hard? This sucks so much. And every time you have a new, most painful experience in your life, it's catastrophic. You're like, first time you have a diaper rash, you're crying for 5 hours. Yeah. Now, if you get a rash of the same magnitude, be like, I've had rashes. Like, this is not a big deal, because your capacity for pain and contextualizing the pain, like you learn, for example, that pain doesn't really actually kill you. So do you look pretty fit? Do you run or something like that?
Often.
Okay. So,
I think I just have a pretty good metabolism, but I mean, it's like I don't know that I can gain weight.
So, but have you what's like the biggest pain you've pushed through? Physical pain. I don't want to open up your entire brain right now, but yeah, what's the hardest thing you've endured on purpose, knowing that the pain would end? Yeah.
Probably exercise, like on purpose.
Right.
I mean, I haven't been tattooed. So
sure. Right.
I cross that one off.
Yeah.
I've only had surgery like when I was young and before I really remember.
Okay.
So it's probably not that. I mean, having my wisdom teeth out wasn't painful. It was just you were drugged, and then
right.
It was inconvenient. So like pain on purpose would probably be exercise of some sort.
Yeah, sure. And then sometimes you'll have to endure pain that's not on purpose, but the older you get,
the emotional or mental is different for sure. That's a whole other conversation.
that is. Well, I mean, I'm not sure if it's the same conversation. So here's the funny thing about your ontograph. The things that happen in your ontograph affect your body.
Yeah.
And the things you do with your body affect the world.
Yeah.
So things that you imagine in your head,
Yeah.
like maybe man should be able to fly, can turn into Wilbur and Orville making it happen.
Yeah.
And also people who have allergies. I brought this up in the previous conversation. It just fascinates me. But people who have allergies to a thing, if they encounter a fake version of the thing, sometimes they'll still react. If
That's
someone thinks they ate peanuts but didn't and has a high allergy, they might start to have breathing problems.
Yes.
If someone thinks that they touched poison oak, they might break out in a rash. If people just get stressed, they could break out in hives, which is an allergic reaction. And what is that for?
Yeah.
There's something happening in your ontograph that manifests in your body and turns into reality from your own imagination.
Is that kind of like that phantom pain you haven't activated on?
Right?
But you still feel. Sure.
Because maybe pain happens in your ontograph. Maybe it's not physical.
Yeah.
Because why would an experience be physical? So I'm trying to sort that out. Like, where's the connection?
You know,
Where's
I
the
don't
disconnection?
I don't know. I was gonna say when you were talking earlier, remind me of the problem of evil? Why do bad things happen to people and why do good things happen?
Yeah.
And I remember thinking about that when I was studying philosophy. And I remember I had a thought that seems really callous, but it's always made a lot of sense to me, honestly. And that is that like because you were talking about the rash, right?
Yeah.
And I was thinking about, I always equate it to a child that wants a sucker. Right?
Yeah.
And when they're 1 or 2 and they have the sucker that they can't have, like, or you take it away, like their whole world, like they just break down and freak out and just like, oh, right? Their whole world is ending.
Totally.
And it doesn't matter if you say you can have it after dinner,
Yeah.
and dinner's in half an hour.
Yeah.
Like, their world's just done.
Right.
Right. And they're, like I said, they're their wits end. But to us, it's not a big deal because we realize that a half an hour after dinner is not very long.
Right.
And we realize it's good to eat nutritional things before you have sugary desserts or whatever.
And even if a plane crashed into your house and your spirits were floating away and your kid said, I don't get the sucker now, you'd be like, it's not a big deal.
Yeah. Well, that's exactly it. So I started thinking about what are these problems or what are these evils that we're talking about?
Yeah.
That bad things happen to good people. And it's like, and I know this seems like a huge judgment to the world out there, but murder and rape and everything else, right?
Yeah.
And I think how can you contextualize this in a way to try to understand? And the only thought that I can have is, I apply it obviously to God, but imagine having a long enough perspective and time frame to where you realize that even this bad thing, as bad as it is in the moment,
right,
when you look at it throughout thousands and thousands or millions of years of potential existence as a spirit beyond this life, like it fades as just something that happened a long time ago, like tripping and falling. And I know that seems really shallow to say. I think that's always been the hard thing, but I don't know how to equate it other than that, because we can see it really clearly with kids.
Yeah.
And they take it as something that's life ending. Like there's no coming back from this.
Yeah.
But it's because their perspective is really, really short.
So that's another thing. Like,
time heals for the most part.
True.
I mean,
but also people who experience the exact same problem might be traumatized or might not.
Yes, they respond differently.
And I don't know whether that's just the case of, the personality trait of neuroticism.
Some are good at it. Some are good at forgetting. Some are good at moving on.
Right.
Some don't. And I think there's genetics in there. I think there's behavioral things, but
as you learn, here's the fun thing. Okay. There's the personality. You can take a personality test and have your big 5 personality traits, like, numbered it by percentile. Right. But it's funny because it's more like you have error bars on that. You'd be like, okay, sure. Like, I'm this orderly, but I know that when I'm hanging out with my friends, I need to be less insistent that they put coasters under there because they're not going to come back. And anyway, it's a glass table. I'm just being a stinker about it, right? But whatever it is, like, you can, the more mature you become, you can sort of create error bars around your personality. And, maybe like just do what you can to take a breath and count to 5 and be a little less neurotic. Or when mom's coming over, yes, I'm going to clean the house. I hate cleaning the house. I'm going to clean the house. Whatever it is, your natural instinct to behave a certain way, it's not exactly you're suppressing it. You're just creating more options for yourself in your ontograph and be like, look, I can be this range instead of like this dot. And that might be how it works anyway, but all I'm saying is, like, as you say, I've forgiven some pretty bad choices in my life. And I got better at forgiving bad choices in my life. And I came to a point where I more or less forgave the world. And I could see someone faulting me for doing that. But I also find that it increases my agency to do good in the world.
It's a heavy load to bear, right? I mean,
yeah. So if I can leave it somewhere that I never have to go back to, or if I have to go back there, I can make the same choice again, or something like that, I'm creating options for myself. So
you can only bear so much.
Right.
You have to select it.
Right. So if you rated all the things in your ontograph by good and evil, some things would be neutral. That tree, it's never going to harm me on purpose. Yeah. Right. But if you rated all of the moral actors in the world good or evil, of course you'll be wrong. Everything in your ontograph you're wrong about, pretty much, as far as I know. The evilest things, you can sort of just acknowledge that they're bad and not dwell on it, or something. Like in your experience, I'm trying to understand, like, what is forgiveness in experience?
What is forgiveness?
Yeah.
Experience? I don't know. I mean, I think there is something practical about forgiveness.
Yeah.
Because like we just talked about, it's hard to carry the load of anger. It's hard to carry the load of wanting revenge.
Yeah.
And we only have so much energy and so much mental. I mean, you know how like they talk about idiot savants, and stuff, and how part of the reason why they're able to do these amazing things of remembering what the weather was like 15 years ago on this specific day is because their brain is not being occupied, or the part of the brain that is in charge of responding in social circles, like appropriately.
Right.
Like, this is what you do when somebody looks at you this way, and you don't sit there and just stare at somebody. Right. Like, it takes a lot of mental energy to do that. Yeah. And so if that's all shut down, right, they don't have that, then, or for whatever reason, there's just a bulk of the mental energy that's able to go into this, to have photographic memory or whatever it is that they're uniquely capable of doing. Yeah. Because the brain is not bogged down with all these day-to-day activities of analyzing all the time. We're like automated vehicles that are always looking at every little thing, trying to be like, okay, there's no tiger around me, I'm safe. Yeah. Okay, but this person that's talking to me, do I feel safe around them? Right. Why do I feel safe around them? Why do I not? Right. And you're making all these calculated judgments all the time. And I think it probably consumes a lot of, like memory space on a computer type thing. Yeah. So I mean, the reason why I say that is because forgiveness seems like there's some practical nature to it, that it's really hard to harbor all these things. Right. You don't let it take your attention up anymore. Well, it's like you have to make that call at some point. You have to say, is the value that I get, because I think one of the reasons, from personal experience, I can just tell you a personal experience I had. I remember there a time being very hurt by something that happened, that somebody, let's just say, did to me, right? Mm. And I think it was just a natural reaction to be hurt by it. Like, I don't know that's something that I feel like I shouldn't have been. Yeah, maybe it should hurt you. Right? Yeah, it should hurt you, right? Yeah. That's a natural reaction. Now, the next stop was, okay, if I now forgive, and they say forgive and forget, but if I forgive, then it's almost like saying it wasn't a big deal, because part of forgiving almost is like moving on.
Yeah.
So it's like saying it wasn't a big deal. Well, it was a big deal.
It was
and
a big
hurt.
deal,
And
right?
if I say it wasn't a big deal, then what the hell was I doing? Like being angry or
And
sad
you're
about it?
lying also.
Yeah, like I feel just kind of stupid because
Yeah.
I shouldn't. If it wasn't a big deal, I should have never really been affected by it.
Right.
So either
And
it
then there'd
was,
be nothing to forget.
yes,
Right.
exactly. So it either was a big deal or it wasn't a big deal, and it was super hard to get to the point where it was like it was a big deal and it hurt, and it's okay to say I'm now going to move on, and it doesn't mean that it wasn't a big deal. And it doesn't mean that it didn't hurt. And
Right.
it doesn't mean that it's maybe a little bit tender.
Yeah.
But I think that was really hard to ever get to, because
Yeah.
in my mind it was like, if I forgive,
Yeah.
it's an admission that it wasn't a big deal, because if I can move on now, why couldn't I move on then? And that whole
But that's a sunk cost fallacy with suffering.
Yes,
Yeah,
it is kind
you've
of.
suffered the suffering. You doesn't have to continue.
It is
Yeah,
kind of.
you invested all this suffering.
Yeah.
Whoa, what's going to become of that suffering?
Like a C.S. Lewis book somewhere. No, totally. But I think
Interesting.
but I think the other side to it is,
Yeah.
I do think a lot of times people, I don't know that I identify with this so much, maybe in certain ways I do that I'm not recognizing, but I think that sometimes the thought of, so like a door-to-door salesman comes to my door
Yeah.
and he says, I'm going to sell you this widget.
Yeah.
It's a miracle cure for this and this. It's only $500. And I
Yeah.
go, great. And I give him $500 and I walk away and I find out that it's a worthless junk.
Yeah.
If I don't remember that somehow, and I don't tap into maybe the guile or what it was that he said or did,
Yeah.
that, and I don't know if this is forgiveness, etc.
Yeah.
But if I don't remember some of what led me down this road,
Right.
then I'm bound to repeat it the next day when the next door-to-door salesman comes.
That is a fantastic
And so
point.
there's like a little bit of utility
Right.
in remembering what happened, and like, maybe I should avoid this circumstance again, or maybe I should
Forgive, but
avoid.
don't forget.
Yeah,
So that's the thing. Like,
that's hard.
so one of the ways that I think about the Ontograph is that it has shapes in it. Okay. And you recognize those shapes. You'd be like, oh, this is a human relationship. Then you find out it was an AI bot. Oh, okay. That's a lie. A human relationship has a shape. A lie has a shape. Or you're dating an actual person, but she misrepresents herself completely. You're like, okay, that was a human relationship and a lie. You know what I mean? But it's going to be all these different patterns, and you can just pretend in your head that it has a certain shape. So let's say that a wrong is a cylinder shape, okay? And you feel like this is starting to feel like a cylinder. I feel like I'm being wronged. Maybe I should back out before I invest. But you only know that because you felt a cylinder before, and you know that it's round on the sides and flat on the tops, right? And so that's the thing. Like when you're navigating life in your Ontograph, you have an incorrect and pathetic version in your head of what it looks like to be wrong, and someone might be helping you tremendously. But look, it totally looks like a cylinder.
Yeah.
Okay, it looks like a cylinder. What are you talking about? It's definitely a cylinder, and I don't trust you. Be like, if you trust me, I'll show you that you can actually open cylinders. Sometimes they have things inside, and it's like, but you've been hurt too many times and you don't want to talk to this person who's selling cylinders. Go away. Right. So that's like a super interesting, such a valuable point. Like the humility to know that you're not perfectly right about things, and the balancing act against not losing $500 on an empty cylinder, or just
over
like
and over again,
getting abused in catastrophic ways that could absolutely end your life. There's a lot of learning involved in that.
It's like a balance there somewhere.
And we don't get old enough to get that right.
Yeah, we only live a certain period.
Yeah, right.
No, you're right. You're right. It's like I think about that with financial stuff. You know, like with bubbles and collapses and whatever, whether it's the stock market or anything else. Like the first 3 that maybe you could watch, you're too young, or the first couple you're too young, so you don't pay
every
attention.
10 to 20 years.
And then, and then the next one, you don't have enough money because you aren't established in a career and stuff. Or you're raising your kids, and so you don't have expendable money to try to take advantage or invest or whatever anyway. And
Right.
so by the time you get there, it's like maybe you can capture one because you've seen it enough times.
Grab yourself a cycle.
Yes, because you're just not able to be positioned in a way.
Right.
So it's like if we lived 1,000 years, yes, you could probably
Right.
nailed it really well.
But then all those other people would be holding.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. They would know that why sell because it'll all just go back.
Yeah,
Yeah,
great.
exactly.
But that's a cool idea, and it's pretty funny because a lot of the people my age right now are like, like there's gonna be a crash.
Yeah.
All these people, they're gonna need to get their equity out for something so they can buy silver or whatever they're
Yeah,
gonna do. And just waiting on some cheap homes
Yeah.
coming down the pike. Don't know if
Hoping.
it'll happen.
Yeah, hoping. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean if you're anyway.
But yeah, I mean it is interesting, like I mentioned to you before. No, I was gonna say though, not to get too religious for anyone that isn't, but I remember when I was studying philosophy and I took a philosophy of religion course, and I remember there being a time, I can't remember the context, but the professor said something to the extent of Christ is the only one that was not deluded in his perception of reality, or like not deceived by his own deception. I can't remember exactly the terminology, but the idea basically was if you come to me for relationship advice,
Yeah.
you better believe that some of the advice that I give you, you probably had this experience before, right? Like, and again, I hate saying certain things in front of camera, but let's say I've been divorced 4 times.
Okay.
And 3 of the times is because the woman cheated on me.
Yeah.
And so it just ended, right? And
Yeah.
you come to me and you're like, man, my wife are just having some problems. You better believe that immediately my mind is probably going to be like,
Yeah.
well, you better rule out if she's stepping out on you.
Yeah,
This
right.
is what happened to me 3 times.
I
right?
know a guy who was married 8 times.
But like my own experiences are going, it's exactly what you're saying. My own experiences are going to shape
Yeah.
the advice that I give you
Yeah.
and what I think you need to do to protect yourself and to figure it out.
Yeah.
There's no way that it's really hard for me to not see what you should do based on the things that have happened to me.
Right. And
But-
yet I can learn from your Ontograph and a bunch of other people's.
Yes, absolutely. You can take that. But what I'm saying is that it seems like the proposition at least was that Christ was the only one who was not deceived by his own or his own experiences and built this crazy Ontograph with all these mistakes and then justification and then digging in deeper and then all these severe course corrections.
Yeah, unlimited overcorrection.
And so he's like the one that can perfectly give advice because he's not his advice is not so tainted by all of his crazy experiences and stuff. He sees clearly.
Yeah.
And I've got to think that part of the blessing, part of the reward, if you can live like Christ, is that you start to see as he sees.
Yeah.
You do as he does, and then you start to see as he sees, and then you start to communicate as he communicates. So that when somebody comes to you and says, hey, this is my issue, you don't immediately go back to, well, she stepped out on me and then this happened and this happened. You step back and you go, well, maybe this did happen, but I can kind of see why. I was a real jerk.
Right.
And I recognize some of my own flaws.
Yeah.
You start to balance it out a little bit where it's not like, oh, it was all their fault. No, it was all, and you start to become more Christ-like in your approach. And you start off by saying, well, what do you think? How are you feeling about it? What are you seeing? And you're just letting them describe instead of just unloading everything you've experienced.
Right.
So I think there's a gift there somewhere.
Well, there's got to be, and the fact is,
the enabling power of the atonement.
I mean, right. It may sound a little bit arbitrary, but you could define humility as that trait. If someone were perfectly humble, they wouldn't make unwarranted assumptions about their experiences.
Yeah.
And yet they would do the best they could with the information they had and seek out valuable information from people who, to the best of their estimation, not playing favorites because they're too humble to play favorites, would actually be able to learn. And if you were raised in an ideal manner, then you probably have that kind of humility. Or if you could just have an experience that taught you a deeper level of humility, then from that moment forward, the ways you add to your ontograph would be more true. They'd be more in line with the objective world.
Don't you think some of the issues though lie with like in a way we're in a system where it's not purposeful, but it's extremely inevitable. And I think we'd agree on this based on religion anyway, that our ontograph's going to be messed up anyway.
But I don't think a human can make a perfect ontograph.
No, I agree. I
Yeah.
agree. And what I'm saying is, what makes our ontograph kind of wonky? I mean, obviously they're different, but what
Yeah.
makes the self-deception and stuff is that we live in a finite world. Right?
Yeah.
There's only a certain amount of space,
True.
certain amount of resources, certain amount. I think about this with Christ feeding the 5,000, right?
Okay.
And it's like he's obviously living in a world of infinite resources, not finite resources.
Mm.
We see it as there's only so much fish and bread to go around.
Yeah.
So how are you going to prioritize who gets the fish and bread? Is it going to be the most hungry, the most sick, the most, right?
The person we all appreciate the most?
Yes. And so you start to make these decisions based on finite resources. And
It's
that's
true.
just the way we live. So you've only got 1,000 pounds of potatoes to feed all these people.
And
How do
plan
you
for next
divide it?
year.
Yes. How do you divide? Yeah. Do you plant for next year?
Right.
Do you give it to this family because of this reason? And inevitably somebody's going to get screwed and somebody's going to get the better lot.
Right.
Right. And so those things start, and then the person that got screwed, their ontograph is going to be shaped by that experience. And
Yeah.
they're
going to be like, everybody's carrying cylinders, man. Let me tell you about this.
yes, exactly. Because this happened to me. Whereas Christ, he sees things in a finite or an infinite.
Yeah.
And so it almost takes it to where you don't even have to think about these things because it's not an issue anymore.
Yeah.
If you've got infinite resources, pay your employees $1,000 an hour because they're an infinite resource. I mean,
Right.
it all becomes kind of meaningless,
Yeah.
but it's like everyone's just taken care of and there's no need to fight over anything or like think about war and like power and stuff. Like what is power if they're infinite? Like
Okay. Great question.
if-
Power. Okay.
If gold were like this,
Yeah.
no one would care about gold because you can just reach down and grab it. What
Sure.
makes it valuable is that it's finite. There's a limited amount.
Sort.
So you have wars over it and you want to claim it.
Except we have like abundance now, and that didn't come from nowhere, right?
no,
so
but it's still finite abundance.
Well, we're making more than we need, enough to sell, enough to share for free. To talk about potatoes.
Yeah.
America exports potatoes net.
Yes.
Okay, to everywhere that eats potatoes.
Yeah.
Like we got potatoes from like the Inca.
Yeah.
We sell potatoes to South America.
Yeah.
Right. So like, we made crazy potatoes that didn't exist before, and the seed of abundance was always there. And with wisdom and care, we've made it so that there's more potatoes. Now,
Yes.
you can knock modern potatoes. They are not as nutrient dense as ancient potatoes. They taste better. They fry up nice. Okay. But
All the most important things.
right, exactly. What do you care about with the potatoes? But anyway, like there's if we wanted to make more potatoes, we figured out irrigation.
Yeah.
And we can make more potatoes.
Yeah, but then we have limited water apparently now.
But we don't though. So we just figured out how to desalinate water.
Are you a climate change denier?
No, but 3/4 the surface of the earth is water.
No, I agree, but at the same time, you got to admit, like, we probably never have truly cultivated the full potential of the world. So
True.
So maybe it's like De Beers with diamonds.
Right.
You hold back a certain
Artificial
amount.
scarcity. No. This is great. Okay, because the things that we invent in our minds can come out. The impossible things that have never happened before are happening all the time. And thirst isn't a problem anymore. Even in Phoenix, Arizona, you can get water, right? And push come to shove, you'll pay $1 for it. Push come to shove, come to slap, somebody will give you $1 so you can buy some water. Anyone who begs in a metropolis, more or less, they'll have their needs met.
Yeah.
No one should have to beg. I don't hope that for anyone. but weird, crazy stuff happens. And you can get locked out of your car and then get mugged, and then you can't get home to your mansion unless somebody helps you out and lets you borrow their phone so you can call your sister and she can PayPal you some money, which you can go pick up. No, you don't have your wallet.
Your phone.
Anyway, all I'm saying is we've solved clothing scarcity. Yes, there are people with too few clothes, but you don't see people walking around naked for poverty like you did
clothes
200
they
years
might
ago.
get teased wearing.
Totally, right? And I don't want anyone to be teased either, but it's progress.
Yeah.
We've solved thirst. There's abundant water everywhere that humans live. Not literally everywhere, and yes, sometimes water rationing happens in certain places. Okay.
Africa and such.
It happens. But yeah, but
it's
I'm
better.
talking exactly. So we're creating abundance. Now, food abundance is in the middle of happening right now. We haven't got it quite tuned because we're eating trash. But we're getting there, I feel like. Hopefully. We'll see. Electricity abundance has been very slow progress, but the amount of electricity an average person uses and can afford now is higher than it's ever been. Yes, there are impoverished people who can't afford their electricity bill, etc. But it's normal for a family to take a 2-week vacation where they fly somewhere, whereas that was literally impossible 100 years ago. And all of these vectors of abundance.
Or just having a refrigerator to actually preserve your food without heavily salted or something.
Totally.
Like, it's a miraculous benefit.
It's a miraculous benefit. So I actually see this accelerating. The fact that the Tesla Powerwall couldn't have existed 20 years. I just think that that's what's happening. And catastrophe is also on the way. Okay? Different kinds of catastrophes, worldwide pandemics, different things. You know? But I see that going along, and here was one of my points. Artificial scarcity. I love that you brought that up. Because here's one of the things that makes people make bad choices. The creation of a zero-sum game. Have you met many bullies, or have your kids been bullied?
Oh, sure.
Can you guess anything about the bully's father?
Well, I remember when I was young, there were kids that I wanted to avoid and such, and and I don't think it didn't enter into my mind until I got much older that they probably have really rough lives.
Bullies have been bullied. Yeah, that's so likely. It's almost every bully has been bullied pretty badly to the point that it traumatized them and put them in a serotonin deficiency. So their serotonin helps them rank against the other people in their social circle, and the way that they've found to get up in their social circle is by violence and coercion. So they're coerced into a low serotonin situation. They try and make up for that serotonin deficiency just instinctively. They become bullies because that's what their instincts tell them to do when things are so rough. Why do I feel like I have to hurt someone? Are we in a scarcity situation? Well, you're certainly in a scarcity situation in your hormones, right? And so people create zero-sum games when really the more, like we found out in the last 100 years that it's much better to have a rich trading partner than to steal your rich trading partner's stuff. We're getting much better at that.
Is this kind of the idea that I love to share the idea that sometimes, especially like in a workplace environment, a lot of people, they picture the pie like this. And they say, well, if you have this much of the pie, and I want a little bit more of the pie, necessarily I'll have to take from you to be able to have more pie. And it's like, no, the idea is pies like this, let's grow it together to this size of pie. And then percentage-wise, you can still have the same amount of pie, but you actually get a whole lot more. Right?
So that's
we do live in a global economy now. And
if I want basmati rice, they grow better basmati rice in India than they grow here. I can get theirs. Or if I want really, really, really good,
so can
Japanese shingmai,
can you
I can only buy it from
mutually benefit just perpetually?
Yeah, we're doing it. It's happening. We're in the middle of it. That's not to say it won't all end in bloody war, nuclear holocaust, deliberate genocide, mass sterilization.
And then you have politicians, and their job depends on making sure that you somehow feel victimized. Otherwise, they don't have a job.
Not only that, but there's only one job. Zero-sum game. Entrepreneurship, you invent a role for yourself that has to be compatible with everyone else's role, which you are not usurping from anyone. And so a hierarchy with a definite top, depending on the stakes, they'll kill each other to get there, or they'll undermine each other, or they'll, set you up with a clandestine meeting
Yeah.
and take photographs
Yes.
or something like that. And zero sum games,
Victoria's Secret mansion, right?
right? Or
The
something.
Playboy mansion.
That one.
I mean,
So
all these women are coming out saying Hugh Hefner would take pictures of them drunk and stuff to basically use as blackmail. So to do
blackmail,
yeah.
right? So people don't perform blackmail in except unless they're in a zero sum game.
Yeah.
People blackmail the folks who have dirt on them.
Yeah.
They have, there's one amount of inheritance that we're going to get, so I'm going to blackmail you to get my piece.
Yeah.
Or they have a scarcity
Yeah.
mindset generally where they don't
So-
realize that they can do something productive and exchange for value with other people.
So you've used the examples of zero sum game, but define it for me a little bit.
Okay, there's only enough for you or me.
Okay.
Or we can split 50-50, and I'm not going to be satisfied with that. Or maybe I am. Okay, some zero sum games end fine, right? But so like I'm saying, there can only be one president of the United States
It's
of
the
America.
idea there's only so much, and so you have to fight over it, and
Exactly.
you have to outwit.
And if I get some, it's because you get less.
yes,
Okay, so it doesn't. There's no additive event. There is a certain scarce amount that is not going to increase, and we just have to battle for our cut. Yeah. So that's a zero sum game. And when we're creating games, we can create mutually beneficial games. If I trade with you, it's because I want what you have more than what I have. And you're not going to agree to the trade unless you want what I have more than what you have. So when we both voluntarily trade, we both get richer, at least in our own minds.
yes.
And then your Ontograph becomes a more abundant place, and you feel like you can share more, and like you're less likely to die tomorrow.
And could we say that because your relationships are good, you're not having to spend emotional energy, physical energy, and time either defending yourself from your enemy,
Right?
or like spending time and resources building walls from your enemy,
Right.
or military weaponry to defend against your enemy.
Yeah.
Right. You can put that into producing more benefit for your society. Right.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So that's the thing. Like, we don't just live in a world that's the way it is. There's, to some degree, it is what we make of it. And depending on the games we create for ourselves, we can learn from our mistakes and create mutual cooperation games where we all get richer instead of fighting what we already see, like a 2-year-old. Like I have the truck or you have the truck.
So why do people engage in this? Simply because is it just a perspective thing? Is it
some of it's perspective?
Is it that you have is it the personality types and you have a sprinkling, and no matter what you do, you're always gonna have a certain amount of these people that this is just like a genetic coding that they didn't ask for, they're just this way. And so they are going to rise to the top no matter what. And being at the top isn't cool unless somehow you make it look like everyone should want to be like you. Because what's the point of being at the top
right?
if it's not something that everyone likes to do?
Right.
And that's just how you see the world anyway.
Yeah.
And so you create, because you rise to the top, and you have all the clamshells or all the tobacco leaves or all the money,
right?
Then you start to shape the world according to the way you see with your tobacco leaves. You hire people with your tobacco leaves
right.
to create perceptions.
Yeah.
Because this is just how you operate. And the rest are just kind of more amenable people anyway. Genetically, they just came that way.
Right.
And so they just kind of exist in this world that's created by a few of these crazy.
It's a good question.
People that we kind of
like
too, because they do create amazing things. Like people talk about how Steve Jobs was a jerk,
right?
But who's not grateful for like an iPhone and stuff?
Or my Samsung phone that's clearly a knockoff of an iPhone.
Yeah.
I mean, if you look at if you zoom out,
and the
word smartphone didn't exist for 2 years after the iPhone came out. Then they started calling things that weren't an iPhone that acted like an iPhone a smartphone. Right.
But so on one hand we don't like them.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, we're so grateful for them.
Yeah.
And I don't know that people, I don't know that maybe you and I are too much like this, we could say. I don't know that people that actually take time to consider other people's feelings and such, I don't know if you can do that and create amazing things that require just so much grit. So it's like you almost have to have some people
Yeah.
that don't give a rip about what you think. They don't give a rip about how you feel about. They don't give a rip about your privacy or your anything.
Right.
And that's why they're able to create something so amazing, is because it just.
I've got at least something for you.
I don't
That's
know.
a lot of
I don't
food
know how
for
you
thought,
say it.
honestly. I'm going to be watching this episode a few times. Okay. But here's the thing. We have a particular balance of the personality types in the human family. And historically, the human family came in, tribe groups of around 20, nation groups of around 100, 1,000 people. And if you've got a nice solid nation, you've got a great balance of the different people.
Yeah.
Somebody has to be the butcher and slaughter the animals, even though they looked them right in the eye.
Yeah.
And somebody has to be the bone saw who can cut your leg off.
Do you think, really just quickly, do you think that if you could take somebody that had a penchant for being a serial killer, if they had the opportunity to just be on a farm and butcher animals instead, that would give them their fix, and they wouldn't need to go out and like do it.
Most serial killers kill and torture animals when they're young.
Yeah, Jeffrey Dahmer, I think, had a fascination with entrails. Talked about
I really think all the different types of people can be put to good use, but I'm not sure. Okay, I think so. They're about 3%.
They have their needs.
Yeah.
Their fixations.
All across the world, 3% of any population is sociopathic. All across the world. Okay? So what I'm saying is, we've got, like in our genetics, you're going to have a certain balance. Most people are going to be average in most things. Some people are going to be tall, some people are going to be short. Some people are going to be stronger, some people are going to be weaker. Okay? And we've got uses for all the different kinds of people. Okay? And one thing about personality is I really feel like, and I need to explore this more, it has a lot to do with the geometric shape of your ontograph, the angle of approach of things, how far things are away from each other. People who are less emotionally connected may feel more distant, and that's a geometry, okay? And people who form tight groups people who form big groups will have wider angles between their people to form a larger, 100-sided thing. Okay, and people who like tight groups will like little triangles, or little squares, or little pentagons. And so we all have sort of a mental geometry. This is an abstract way to talk about it, but every ontograph has a different shape. And maybe your ontograph is shaped like this, and maybe my ontograph is shaped like this, right? But all the different people, and all the different types of people, and all the different personality types, they all work together to create a superorganism type thing that helps you get the different things done that humans need to do, whether it's somebody's got to butcher the animals, or someone's got to be the most nurturing person in the entire village that everyone completely respects and no one would ever harm, right? Grandma, the uber grandma, right? And so, like, we're all functioning together, and every once in a while you get a hermit, somebody wants to live alone, totally fine. Maybe we need some of them too, in case everything blows up, somebody has to come back in, salvage stuff, put it together for the next people. I don't know, okay? But we've got a wide variety, and it seems highly it's advantageous. There was a better word, I couldn't find it. It seems highly advantageous to have a wide variety, and fascinatingly, the more humans we get on this planet, the more we can diversify labor, find different jobs for different types of people, and benefit from each other's different specializations.
So this is really interesting, because on one hand, it seems like a plug for the thought, and I'm sure you've heard of it before, or familiar with it, whether you want to call it socialism or what, but the idea that people often do well what they like to do.
Yeah.
And the doctor, so the thought is, okay, you have some people that would become a doctor if the education was free and everything equal. They would become a doctor and do the doctor role, even if it paid $40,000 a year.
There are people who do. There are countries where that's the deal. Yeah,
because that's what they want to do and they like it.
Right.
You got other people who become a doctor, and the big reason is because they want to make a lot of money. And so once they become a doctor, they're like, no, I should get paid way more than you.
Yeah.
Because I don't really like this. I just did it to make a lot of money. And that's why I'm doing it, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And so the idea is you let everyone just do what they like to do.
Yeah.
and they more or less get paid the same because they're doing what they like to do, and there's use for every personality type, etc. And everyone would be happier because they would just do what they like to do, and you would still get doctors, you'd still get, you know, ditch diggers, you'd still get whatever, because people just like different things, but they wouldn't be so because more or less they'd get paid the same to do it, right? So it seems like there's a little bit of a plug for that, and I'm not saying that I think there's some merit to that idea.
Okay.
But on the flip side, we all have to agree. I think we have to agree. I shouldn't say it like that, but there is benefit, I would say, to the idea of capitalism. Like, that's how you get better products, is when people compete to do the best thing for society. And a certain amount of people out there would do it just to create the best thing.
Yeah.
But a lot of people are motivated by creating the best thing to make the most amount of money.
Okay, so that's a very 1950s kind of capitalism. And the kind of capitalism you see thriving now is niche capitalism.
Oh yeah, no, it's not the same. I agree.
Right. And the more you can drill down to solve someone's exact problem, like right now I'm writing a search engine optimization for web developers using only free tools e-course. Right? Because web developers already know 90% of SEO. 90% of SEO is typing code.
You'll just have to sell it with traffic. People can put ads on your site.
That's a great idea.
I mean, that's
Yeah,
obvious, right?
yeah, I'm gonna put it on Udemy, I think. But anyway, the point is, if I can get exactly what someone wants, they'll pay me 5 times as much.
Yeah.
You know, instead of being like, hey, here's 80% of what you want. They're like, thanks.
Yeah.
You know, but if I can give them, here's 99% of what you want, they'll be like, hoba hoba.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And so niche capitalism is more of a person finding their own sort of role kind of thing. But one thing that I would be wary
I
of.
think that's hard for a lot of people, though.
Oh, it's super hard for a lot of people.
Because I think there are a lot of people that it's like, I just want to be a good worker, and it's like,
yeah,
but you know, unfortunately, there are a lot of people that are willing to be a good worker. And
so
I'm sorry that you were born this way, but society doesn't deem what you feel comfortable doing as valuable. Because
okay, we got to disconnect money with value.
I agree.
No. Okay, in this conversation, okay, because in the Ontograph, what you value is in a little region of your Ontograph called valuable things. Okay, I'm just making this up on the fly, but this is kind of how I've been feeling about it. Okay, so you'll go and, like, my daughter found a very round rock and was super impressed. And I have seen 100,000 very round rocks, and she's seen maybe 2. But this one she could grab this time, and it was very special. And it was valuable to her. And she asked if she could put it in her pocket. And I said, yes. You can't put all those, you can pick which rock you're going to bring home. So I don't want to ruin the washing machine when you forget to take them out of, when I forget to remind you to take them out of your empty pocket. So what is valuable is subjective. Value is subjective. And there are people who want to do enough to relax with their friends, and they should be allowed to do that. They're yes.
And I think we live that, like, America is great because people are allowed to do that largely.
I love it.
Yeah.
We've never been freer to find our niche or are being a completely average person, if that's what we actually want. Because some people get a lot out of conformity.
But hold on, how do you reconcile that with, you know, if I like to just wander around your garden back here, like, ultimately, I
better be my friend.
I have to eat 3 times a day.
Yeah.
And if you're like, look, I appreciate that you like wandering around my garden.
Yeah.
But it's not producing anything. And I can't film you wandering around my garden and put it on YouTube. People don't watch it enough to create
We only
revenue.
made 18 cents this week.
Yeah, to create revenue.
Right.
So I know you're hungry.
Yeah.
You have to, like, clothe yourself or put on a coat, at least in the winter, to stay warm, to stay alive. Like, you have to produce something in order to justify your existence.
That's almost true. You're so close.
But doesn't it get extrapolated out in this world that we just live in, where it's like,
in this world, you're right about this world, but there are people who live out in the jungle in Aboriginal tribes And do you think they work more hours per week or less hours per week than an American?
I could see either. But
Either,
probably,
right?
Probably more.
Way less.
Way less.
15 to 27 hours a week.
Well, aren't they spending their time? Maybe it's just because it becomes a
They
lifestyle.
tell
if
each
they
other
just scout.
stories.
Well,
They play
while
their
they're
native
digging for
musical instruments.
clams or something.
No, 15 hours, 27 hours a week. You dig the clams, you bring them back. You live by the
Okay,
river.
but if
There's
they
not
get-
too many people.
If they get an infection, they die, right?
A lot of times, sometimes they'll have some pretty good herbs.
Yeah.
Like there's plantain growing right here.
But they're not going
If
to.
I get some kind of infection on my skin, I can just squeeze the juice out of this and rub it on there and it goes away.
No, I agree. So there has to be, like they say, the Native Americans when somebody got older
Yeah.
and they couldn't keep moving, they sat down in a tree and waited to pass. Like that's just
And
like,
that's what life is
death
like.
was coming, and so
Sure.
you didn't worry about it. You didn't fight it at all costs.
Well,
You
we
didn't-
haven't solved death either.
Yeah, I agree. Well, not that you have to solve it, but you have to be okay with it.
I would.
But
Well, we're very bad at being okay with death in our culture. I
don't
would
they
say.
say that like more like I can't remember what it is, but this vast amount of money is spent on people usually in their like last
The
year
most
of life or
money you'll
something?
spend on medical bills is usually the last 3 months of your life.
Yeah,
That's
and
how
it's
we
like-
go out. We go out in a blaze of pharmaceuticals.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's like if we were just okay with it, we said, look, I am slowly passing. Don't sit there and perform all these surgeries and
Right.
experimentations and drugs. And
There are those who do. You mentioned Steve Jobs.
did he just kind of
I think, if I'm not mistaken, he tried to cure his pancreatic cancer with vegetables or something. And that's his choice to make.
and if it didn't work, that's okay.
Yeah. And what? He looks back on his life and he's like, I was such a loser.
Yeah.
No one will ever say my name. Right?
Yeah. of course
Maybe
not.
he was good. Maybe he was
Yeah,
like,
he was
I
content.
think I revived Apple like 4 times or
Yeah.
something. You know
I've
what I
done
mean?
my
So-
work.
right.
Now
And
I
maybe,
move on.
and
Move
I don't know if that's how he felt, but yeah, they're great around here. So many of them. Anyway, yeah, what if you want to forage,
Mm.
I would hope there's a place where it's legal for you. It's pretty illegal to forage almost everywhere that I know of.
So let me ask you. So sorry, is it just a theoretical thing? Is it true that really and truly, when you get down to the nuts and bolts, there aren't really people, unless they're mentally ill, in which case I think as society we'd make accommodation for those who we feel like truly just by the random stroke of biology don't have the faculty to build it. Maybe all they can do is hit shells against a rock, right? I mean, just very, but
Yeah,
there
okay.
aren't really people that just want to wander around your yard all day. Like even the most unproductive individuals, if
Yeah.
you want to, will still be able to do something that is not needed in society. Is that the pitch?
Yeah, but depending on your society, there will be people who are considered a net negative, and it's their time to go. Like in Japan, they had a culture just like what you described in the Native Americans called obaste, which means chucking out grandma. Okay, it means grandma, like disposing of your grandmother.
Soylent Green. Take it.
No, she just goes over the hill and sits down and dies, or drowns herself, or gets eaten by the now extinct Japanese wolf. So, every culture. Okay, I mean, a very famous example.
But that's
was
grandma and she's old. What about the 25-year-old kid that's just unmotivated?
Well, for a gruesome example, a lot of people would be born with Down syndrome are aborted in advance nowadays.
Yeah.
And a lot of people, we don't kill people who survive with developmental disabilities
No, I agree.
in America, but it's really common in lots of developing nations, right?
Yes, I agree. And I think morality wise, we've gotten to that point where it wasn't the Spartans or whatever that throw a child off the
Right.
cliff. Right. So we're beyond that. But I'm saying the good looking, physically capable 25-year-old that just doesn't want to go work.
Okay, so
Like, what do you do?
what does who do?
Well, they need to eat.
Okay, so they'll get hungry, right?
Yes.
Okay.
But what about when people aren't willing to? I mean, I guess you're saying they'll get hungry. Let them forage. Let them figure it out. Right.
They'll figure something out.
But in society, no, what we say is, I'm an elected individual.
Right.
We got to take care of these people.
Right.
So give to me of your labor so I can redistribute it. I mean,
All right.
I guess I'm making a confession. Let me tell you one of my ontograph shaping things.
Yes, absolutely.
In all truth.
Yeah.
So I went to law school. And then when I came out, I told you, when I came out of law school, it was 09.
Mhm.
Everything was, I tried to find work, couldn't. So I ended up managing phone book distributions.
Right, sure.
So I would go out and I would hire people off Craigslist, whatever. And I would get people and I got to where I would ask people on the phone before I hired them, what do you got going on?
Yeah.
And I would get people that say, not a darn, I can work all day. I don't have any other work. I'm out of work, no other commitments. And then I'd get people that would be like, well, I'm an insurance agent, whatever. I just want to make some extra bucks.
Yeah.
I'd be like, okay, cool. So maybe you could do this much. Is it still worth it to you, essentially? Many, many, many times, the people that were working a full-time job would still do more than the people that had nothing going
If you
on.
want something done, give it to a busy person.
Yes. Now listen, I was in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho.
Yeah.
I talked to a guy. He was probably 30, 35. I don't know. Talked to him on the phone. I said, hey, I saw your ad. I want to work. Okay, cool. What do you got going on? Well, I don't, I'm out of work, whatever. and he said, I got to work. I've got a wife and 4 kids.
Yeah.
I've got to provide for them. And I said, great. It's a stopgap. Obviously, in 3 weeks, you're going to have to figure out something else. But for now, make hay while the sun shines, slow hanging fruit.
Okay.
Right. So he comes, he loads up his truck. And this is actually some labor. They meet me at the storage unit. I unload. It's probably £1 a book. I help them unload off the pallets about 1,000 books.
Yeah.
So it's about 1,000 pounds you're carrying into their truck, right? I load up some for myself. I'm out in the neighborhood. About an hour and a half later, I get a phone call. This guy says, hey, I just don't think this works for me.
Wow.
I said, what do you mean it doesn't work? He says, well, I've been out delivering books, and it's like I'm crunching the numbers and I'm just not making very much. And I said, well, yeah, it's not like an awesome career or anything, but
if you need a few $100 this week.
Yes.
Right.
But you said you don't have anything and you've got a wife and 4 kids you got to take care of. I said, I don't understand. Like, what are you going to do then? And he says, well, I'm barely making any more than what my unemployment would pay. And if my unemployment pays $300 a week or $500 a week, and I make $560, I spend all this time in labor to make 60 extra bucks.
And then his unemployment check is also diminished.
Yes, it's diminished.
Right.
So that's a problem maybe with the way we have things set up. But you better believe in my Ontograph, I was like, we should not have this system set up like this. like this guy, this is ruining this guy's willingness to work.
I understand.
And so we should not, government needs to get out of this business of taking care of people, because it just makes it to where people don't want to do work. They want to just wait.
It's an able-bodied man with responsibilities, and if he got hungry, he would find something.
Yes.
Conceivably, not necessarily. There are mentally ill people who cannot provide for themselves. And before modern welfare, we used to have certain things. We used to have mutual organizations.
We had churches and stuff.
We had churches, but there was also a thing where all of the steel workers would get together and hire a doctor to serve the union. And it had nothing to do with the steel company.
Yeah.
These are, cooperatives, mutual aid organizations. That's a great generic term for all the different kinds of cooperatives, all the different kinds of insurance pools, all that people would buy each other houses.
You're living in the Wild West.
Yeah.
And all of you are saying, man, we all have to spend time guarding our own ranch and stuff. Let's pool together and hire a sheriff.
Exactly.
We can get back to ranching. He will do this.
Right. And so there's always been some kind of option, whether it was alms for the poor. And that guy's poor because he has some kind of problem. And maybe people would say he's lazy, and maybe some people would help, and maybe some people wouldn't.
I get his point. It's like,
right.
Why would I sit there and do this?
Because it's about incentives. Right. And he has to look at the shape of his ontograph and say, where can I get marginal value? And you can't get marginal value by selling your time when you could be getting, everything else funded. And so it's true. It creates what economists call a perverse incentive and even a moral hazard.
Yeah, moral hazard. For
Yeah,
sure.
those are terms that they use for
And
that.
it makes me
And-
not like government. So
Fair
seriously,
enough.
so I start to be like, this
Yeah.
is not helping people.
Yeah.
Right. And obviously,
Well, everybody hates at least the other government, right? Like everybody hates at least half of government.
Is that poison hemlock you have growing over there? You ever looked at?
Let's go look at it after. I know there's
I have some in my yard, so that's why I was looking. I was like,
well,
that's weird.
we have a, what is it called? We have a hawthorn.
Uh-huh.
And that's actually a pretty great heart medicine, but I'd hate to get that confused with some kind of poison. So my wife's a master herbalist. Oh, I think I told you.
Oh yeah, she would know.
Right, yeah. So we actually harvested some and dried it and put in bottles.
Well, it must not be. I'm talking about the white tip stuff. Stuff
That
that's
is
growing tall.
wild carrot, also known as Queen Anne's lace.
So there you go then, because that's what people say. Like it looks just like wild carrot.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
You can
we
tell,
haven't
like-
been eating it.
You can tell like the stock going up. It'll have the vein
Yeah.
structure.
We have been feeding it to the chickens, and they're still
not
fine.
dead.
The eggs are
It's
great.
Probably not it.
We're not dead. So anyway,
Anyway, going back to
yeah. So there's such a thing as a perverse incentive, such a thing as a moral hazard, and it's true that when a person is navigating their life, they will walk through the different paths they can walk, just like they would walk in an objective world maze, to make decisions about where they want to go and how much effort they're willing to put to get there. And if it had been legal for you to pay that guy under the table because it was only a couple $100 a week, he would have taken a couple $100 a week. Be like, hey, only take one pallet, because then I can pay you. Then I don't have to report your expense. Because I don't know. My CPA told me that if it's
There's
less than
probably
$650 or something, you don't have to file a
I didn't think about
1099.
that.
I don't remember what.
Yeah, no, you're at $600. Yeah,
Yeah,
and maybe it's gone up with inflation, but yeah,
right. So there are options here and there.
Yeah.
And if he could work, at a donut shop, delivering, that doesn't have to be an employee job, and he could just make $200 a week that way.
Yeah.
For a couple of weeks. Do anybody need any, short time? And so he'd have to navigate his incentives that way to avoid reporting. There's a local handyman who was like, hey, you got any under the table work for me? Just asked me straight up.
Yeah.
He's like, I'm on permanent disability, but I can still do things.
Yeah.
I can't do things for long,
Yeah.
but I can still do some things.
Yeah.
And I'm so tired of being poor,
Yeah.
and I'd love to do some work. And I'm like, I will absolutely put you in my phone. But so it's true. Like, you're not navigating an objective world. You're navigating your ontograph, and that also includes all of the social world with all of the social consequences, which are not natural consequences. Those are artificial consequences invented by people.
So I have a question.
Yeah.
And maybe this reveals more of me than I would like. I keep on thinking there's got to be a way to monetize this somewhere.
Monetize what?
Like this thought.
You always see the angle standing.
It's just, I don't know. It's just part of the way I work.
Yeah.
But I keep on thinking this is very, very complex.
Yeah.
How do you monetize it?
There are some great ways.
There's got to be.
There are ways. So here's the thing. You can go to understandmyself.com right now and take a personality test for $10. And there's hundreds of thousands of people taking that test every year. You could take an ontograph geometry assessment and learn what your ontograph looks like for a few. It would have to be really simple.
Yeah.
Because even though your ontograph is less than a trillionth of the universe, we could certainly get less than a trillionth of it on a freaking database. Okay. But if we started having people map out their ontographs by giving us little bits of information, we could give them a cool report to see how their ontograph differs from other people's ontographs. It'd be like, hey, guess what? This occupational functionality arm of your ontograph has a couple of tweaks that could probably increase your earning capacity by $15,000 a year. Or, hey, we noticed that you're doing the things that you find valuable, but that people who rate their lives as more fulfilling are doing these things instead. You might want to try those. Here are some customized suggestions. Perhaps you should get out more. Perhaps you should try and acquire one more friendship this year that is meaningful to you. Or, hey, we noticed that you're only sleeping 4.5 hours a month. 80% of the people who have that, a week, a day, a night. I need more sleep, Danny. Sorry, too much contract work. I gotta stop. But anyway, the point is, you could say we found that 80% of the people who are only getting 4.5 hours a night get up to an hour and a half more per night if they buy this, sleep meditation app. So there are ways to
So
monetize
it's
it for sure.
diagnosis to building.
Diagnosis. I wish I knew better what that word means.
I mean, evaluation or
It is evaluation.
or a manifestation or a presentation of where it seems like you are and what things maybe could tweak for you to build.
Yep.
Either socially or emotionally or physically or economically.
Right. Because I
don't know that I like diagnosis. It's just it becomes everyone's diagnosed with something.
If I just knew what the term meant better, it might have been perfect. I just don't know. I don't want to comment on that particular word, but yes, it's an evaluation, it's an assessment, just like a personality test. And if you have taken ontographic assessment and you find out that like there's something that you need to forgive someone for, and it'd be like, hey, we realize it's terribly uncomfortable, and if you want some coaching with that, here's a free video series, about how to, improve that section of your life. I don't know, but it is surely monetizable. And that was another question that Dan had. He was like, hey, what could this do for people? Which is the same question. What value can I provide to people? And if it's enough value, if they perceive enough value, then they'll provide value to me too. So yeah, that's happening.
I met a woman and her husband with kids, and I flew up from Austin in April, and she have a website, but basically she specializes in, like, I don't know if it's crisis management, basically workforces where say the founding CEO is going to retire. And like people will start to be like, oh my goodness, like he's the visionary, he's the one that's been with the company, and they start to kind of freak out.
Oh yeah.
And she goes in and like says, okay, this is how you want to present it to company,
right?
And this is what you want to say in connection with it,
right?
And then here's some aftercare stuff for after you release the news, and people start to worry about who's going to have the vision for the company. Am I going to get laid off?
Berkshire Hathaway's going through that right now.
Yeah, kind of like
huge that. Freaking deal.
And if there's like, say there's mass layoffs, other people start to worry, well, am I next, right? So it's crisis management. So I almost see it as like, obviously a lot of companies are really interested in trying to make sure their workforce is as healthy as it could be, because the company is a conglomerate of workers, obviously. Managed well, optimized together well. Yeah. Like a well-oiled machine. Right. Which obviously there's room for those that like to do that. But the company is the employees and everyone. So if they're struggling, the company's going to struggle. Right.
You could definitely do business organization consulting through applied ontography.
There you go.
You could totally do that. Anyway, what I'm going to do right now, if by your leave, if you don't mind, is to post it on YouTube and on ontograph.org, because that's where the other ones are.
Did I say anything that's like helps with the Ontograph idea? I got off on tangents.
Yeah. Oh man, no. I'm going to be digging through this. And what Dan did after our thing was he Facebook messaged me some questions. You've got my text. You got my number now. So if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer because it helps me think about it. But yeah, Dan had like 3 fat questions, and I'm going to post the question and response on the blog post on ontograph.org. And I got to figure out a good what is it called? A good speech to text app to write out our
to dictate it.
Yeah, because might as well. Anyway, so I'm that's what I'm going to do with this, and eventually I might put some AdSense ads on there or find a sponsor, some space case businessman with a weird picture of the universe or something. I don't know.
I would really like to, I mean, I can't imagine there aren't just a ton of these already anyway, but I'd really like to do something where people like, I like conversations.
Yeah.
I don't like just saying something, because it's like
a sermon.
Yeah, I really like the dialogue, and I like the sharing ideas. And I'd really like a medium whereby people, submitted like, this is what's going on in my life, and this is kind of what I'm trying to, and then kind of, I guess it would be like therapy. I'm not a therapist, but kind of like giving some advice about, like, I think it'd be really fulfilling. Money or
Yeah.
it'd be really nice to kind of help people optimize their life or something.
Yeah, I think so.
Strategize.
Right. Yeah. And if
I feel
there's
like life is a lot of strategy. Really.
it is for you. That's definitely
I
how you
guess so,
think. Yeah.